Hey everybody, this is going to be part two of my videos on sort of my way I would have developed an internal assessment. Let's get started. Okay, so last time we made a folder on our desktop with some stuff in it. We set up two things. We started a Word document for section A, and we even started the development process by starting a project. In this case, in the environment that I teach most primarily in, which is in Java, in the IDE Netbeans. I also teach a lot in Visual Studio, and I teach in C#. I'm also a big proponent of the Eclipse IDE. So if you're not one of my students, or even if you are one of my students and you're not comfortable working in Netbeans, that's not really the point here. The point is to develop in an environment that you're comfortable in. Okay, so with that in mind, here you can see that Word document. Here you can see that project. But also, last time I showed you how you can quickly get to my website, mrwalks.wordpress.com. And this is, of course, for the students I teach, but even for the students who may be watching this video who I don't teach, you can find resources there. As your teacher, I have provided those resources as part of your learning. You are welcome to my resources even if you aren't one of my students, but you also, if you have a computer science teacher, should have access to some resources there. And of course, the internet is full of resources as well. So today what I want to do is start section B, the sort of written journal section, and obviously start some of the development. So let's take a look at section B. Section B is going to be worth, let me just get a pen ready here, is worth 6 marks out of the 34 potential marks. So it's also worth 12% of the total mark on the internal assessment. This is just like section A. It is also a written section. This is not a coded section. This section is marked by what you write. It can be one or more documents. It could include a record of tasks and a design overview. Okay, so how have I broken that down? Well, I've broken that down as you want to make some kind of a table, but it doesn't have to be a table. It could be just bullet points, which is essentially a journal from when you started developing this to sort of the way you got it through to the completion. It should, as I write here, it should tell the story of how you wrote your solution to the problem identified in section A of the write-up. It can also include all the issues and the challenges that come up along the way, and I actually definitely recommend that because that makes it more real to the person marking it, that because nobody develops software and doesn't encounter any problems. So you can also use this, as I say here, to outline all the coding things you do. So as you start to think of ideas like, oh, this would be a good place for an array. This would be a good place to create a class. This might be a place I could use an abstract data type. Those thoughts should be journaled in section B so that, again, they get an insight into your thought process, okay? It can include text, it can include sketches, planning documents, UML diagrams, snippets of code. And a lot of that stuff won't count on your word count because it will be visual in nature. It will be a graphic placed in there, okay? And then the final thing I'm going to recommend you do in this section is a test plan. How will you know that it works? We're not going to have time to do all of that in this video today. Obviously, a lot of the videos will sort of journal the development process. But since we're here on section B, let's take a second to open up a new Word document and create a section B that we can continue to keep adding to as we build this thing. So I'm going to once again widen out my margins here. So nice wide margins. And I'm going to even steal a little bit from section A to ease my timeline here for section B. Okay. And as well, you can see here, I can include something called record of tasks, which I think I will. I'll call this my record of tasks. Okay. And I'll be writing something here. And then below that, I'll have my design overview. And I'll be kind of going back and forth between these things as I kind of journal my progress here. So I'm going to save this document just the way I saved the other one. So I'm going to put it in the same place so it's all in one folder so I don't get lost with all my IA stuff. So my internal assessment, this will be my section B. Okay, so I got my section A, I got my section B. I'm ready to go. Okay, so I will be journaling this. Let's take a second before we get into this to look at how it will eventually be marked out of those 6 marks. So what's the difference between getting a 3 or a 4 on this, or a 5 or a 6? I didn't include the lower marking bands because I assume if you're watching this video, you're probably shooting for something above the 3, 4 at least. Okay, so a record of tasks. So if I complete what I wrote in that Word document, I'll have that. And a design overview. And a test plan. Okay, that reminds me. I should probably put that in as well. I should put in my testing plan. Okay, so again, I don't have to have that all done today. It's just a reminder of something I'm going to need to do. Okay, now are they partially complete? Yes, they are. Right now they're partially complete. But if I look at 5, 6 here, it says it has all those 3 things and they're detailed. So I don't want to be partially complete. I want to have detail in these. Okay, I want to have detail in there so that the marker is willing to give me the mark of a 5 or a 6 because he or she feels that there was enough detail there. Now, do they provide a basic understanding of how the program was developed? In reading this solution overview, do I have a general basic idea how they made it? Or do I have a clear understanding? I don't want to leave them with the idea that it was just basic. I want them to understand that it's clear. So those are going to be the 2 words we're going to focus on. That in developing section B, that it's got a lot of detail and that it's very clear. Those are the 2 things we're shooting for so that our marker is more willing to give us that 5, 6 marking band. Okay, we have the things we need: record of tasks, design overview, testing plan. Okay, we've got to make sure they're detailed, got to make sure they're complete. Okay, so now we know what we're doing. So now what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to actually draw out some of my plan here for how this could go. So I've created a sort of a drawing area here where we can draw in some ideas here of what this would look like. And I'm basing this off of section A. Section A, the description of the problem itself. Okay. So let me think here. Okay, so we know in section A, one of our ways we could make this work is that we could just have some prompts. Some prompts like, say at the C drive, right? We'd prompt the user and we'd say something like, what should you do, user? And then maybe it would break to a new line and say, like number 1, enter a new note. Right? We're making electronic notes. Number 2, see all the notes. All the notes we've entered. And number 3, view a note. View a selected note or a specific note. So one thing that we could do is we could have this appear on the screen in front of the user. This kind of a prompt. And then if they entered in number 1, right? Like if they hit enter after typing in number 1, what would that do? Well, they would type in the text of a new note. What if they entered into the prompt a 2? Okay, then it would provide a list of all the notes, right? It would output note, 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 note like that. Okay, so it would list them all. And then what if they typed in a 3? Okay, well then I would have to prompt the user to say enter note index, for example. Like this is, I know, speaking to something like an array, but the idea of entering an index, like I want to see note number 5, and then it would display that note on the screen. Okay, so that would be one potential solution to this, right? This would be one way I could do this, is using this kind of prompting system like this. So hang on, I'm going to take all of this sort of written stuff, and in theory, everything I just wrote there, okay, make that a little bit smaller. That could be essentially part of my design process. So I'm going to write that in there, okay? So in the record of tasks, okay? So I'd put in the date, today's date. So today's date is March the 18th, right? On this day, I started drawing sketches of potential user interactions like this, okay? And for that, I'm going to say see appendix A, okay? I don't necessarily want to paste in the picture right here in this design overview, right? And by the way, I'm going to make this into something like an actual record. So I'm going to make that a number 1, okay? So on March the 18th, okay, I started drawing sketches of potential user interactions like this, right? Now, should I really be putting a date there? I guess I could. That's one way I could do it. I could also say like stage 1, stage 2. There isn't anything in the IB specifically on how to do this. Also, I don't need to put it in an appendix, but I think I will. So I'm going to make a new document here. I'm going to save this one as appendix A, right? So just so I'm getting all my stuff organized here. My internal assessment. Appendix A. Okay. So now I'm going to take a screen capture of this, right? My initial idea for a prompt. Okay, there we go. And paste that into Appendix A. Maybe I'll put a little border on it. I think that's a good idea so that the marker knows this is not writing, this is a picture of it, right? So see Appendix A. I'll even, this isn't that formal, but I'll just call this Figure 1. Figure 1 of Appendix A. Okay, so just sort of getting things organized here. Getting sort of the idea of this internal assessment, the idea of it down. Yes, okay. So there, I got that down. Okay. So let's go back to that. So I started drawing sketches of potential. See Appendix A, Figure 1. Okay. Then let's say it's on this same day, I decided to advance the user, and I could say user interaction, but I'm going to now switch to user experience to include dialogues. Okay. See, and this will now be seeing Appendix A, Figure 2. So I'm going to have to create a Figure 2 now. So I'm going to go here, and let's draw out something this time for that. Okay. So now we can imagine that rather than just do prompts on the screen, like system.out.println, for those of you that know Java, now maybe I'm doing dialogues. Okay. Again, if you're in C#, this would be like the message box dialog. If you're doing JavaScript, this would be like the alert dialog. In Java, it's the J option pane. You get the idea, okay? So maybe it would be something like a little welcome dialog. Welcome to the electronic notes program, right? And they click OK, right? So you know what a dialog box looks like, something like that. Welcome. Then it would go to what to do. And just like the other one, there'd be like a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, the same kind of stuff we had in the other one. But this one, they would have to enter it, right? So we'd have the little OK, the little cancel button. Okay, they would actually type it in to this box. And they type in which thing they want to do. So from the welcome screen, we'd go to here. And then from here, let's say they entered a 1, right? So they want to enter a note. So enter the note text. And again, this would be another one of those input dialog boxes. Okay, so let's quickly. Okay, so they would enter their note text. And then it would go back to this kind of screen. So there'd be some kind of loop here that would loop it back to what to do next, etc. Okay? So I think you're getting the idea here of how it would work with dialogues. It would be the same kind of logic, it's just that now we're dealing with something a little more user visual, something that would actually appear on the screen rather than typing at a particular sort of a thing there. Now, I'm going to take a screen capture of this now and put it in as my figure 2. Okay, so that was my figure 1, this will be my figure 2, put a border on it. Okay, so I got a figure 1, I got a figure 2, write that. Okay, let's go back to my my journal, okay? So let's say now it's a different day. I know it isn't, but we're trying to simulate this. Let's say it's the next day, March the 19th. My record of tasks, or the little journal I'm kind of creating here, is I went to my user for feedback on the ideas. The user wanted more of a user interface, okay? So not a dialog box, not prompts, but an actual computer program with like a form or a frame that they can interact with. So I'm going to make this a figure 3. I'm going to sketch out this, okay? So I wanted more of a user interface, which I sketched out. Okay, so now let's make a much larger sketch for figure 3 and maybe more, right? So this is kind of now I could have combined this all into one sort of day or 2 days of me developing the user interface. And let me just kind of compare this to what I wrote in section A. Minimum case scenario, allow the user to enter text in an electronic note. We'll have a text entry, allowing them to enter text. Enter more than one note. The user interface will be either dialog boxes or console. So I've kind of met at least the minimum requirements in terms of sketching it out. Now I'm kind of moving up more towards the typical case, a form or a frame with controls and stuff like that. Okay, so let's move to the next phase now. Okay, an actual user interface here, something a little more what is more user interactive. Okay. Okay, so let's get started on this one. The user interface. Okay, a form, otherwise known as a frame, depending on the language and programming and what you're comfortable with. Okay, so let's say we had our like electronic notes, right? Some sort of a title. Okay, and then we'd have a list of all of our notes. And then that would be something like this, a box with, you can scroll it up and down. That would be cool, okay? And then we had some buttons where we could make a new note. So we'll just shade this like it's a button. A new note, and then one where we could see all the notes, okay? See them all, or we could delete a note, okay? That would be useful. So these are the actions, the things that it would need to do. So see all the notes, delete the notes. We could see a specific note, one note. Okay, where we could search for notes, where we could sort the notes. These are some more of the things that we sort of now moving towards more of our ideal scenario here, right? Maybe we'd have a graphic in here somewhere, some kind of a fancy note graphic with like a push pin in it or something like that, right? Some sort of cool graphic thing here that would appear. And then that's all in the user interface, right, that the user could interact with in that way. Right? So it's not a dialog box, it's something we build, something like that. This would be more along the lines of something that maybe the user could kind of get a hold on, right? Is something that looks like that. All right, let me take a second to shrink that down. Something like that. That would be cool, right? Something like that would be good for the user to interact with. And then let's sort of expand on that a little bit, right? So what happens if they click this button new? Maybe that actually launches another user interface where they could actually enter a note. So we have a user interface that says note title. We have an entry field where they could enter in a title. Note date. And they could enter in the date. And then the actual note itself, a larger area where they could type in the note. And then we give them the option to click OK and cancel if they change their mind. They don't want to make the new note. So something like that. That would be cool, right? That would really be cool if that kind of a thing. Now we're dealing with not just one user interface, but maybe we're building a couple user interfaces to make this program more interactive, a better user experience from this. Okay, so now what we're doing is when we click that new button, okay, we're making a new form, right? Another option is we could just have this, or we could have this all on one form. But if we do that, if we make the form bigger and we add different parts to it, then what we're going to need to do is maybe enable or hide parts. And by parts, I'll use the word controls. We would need to do that to make it all kind of fit in one. Okay? So that's an idea, right? That's an idea of potentially a different type of user interface. Now, what happens if they click something like the search button? Okay? Well, then maybe I could just use one of those dialogues, a J option pane dialog. Maybe I don't need to make a million different forms. That might be just too much work, right? So the dialog, maybe, you know, it says like search, and maybe I have the text box with the OK cancel button. Maybe I make it a little bit of a fancier one that where it drops down what type of search that they're going to do. Like, are they going to search for it by the name of the note, or by the date, or the title? But maybe it's one of those dialog boxes for searching, okay? Maybe that's also the way I do sorting, okay? Maybe that's also a dialog. Why would it be a dialog? Because I can pick sort by, right? So it could be sorting by date, sorted by title, right? So I can sort by multiple different things here, other than just sort it, okay? So these are, again, just ideas now, the way this thing could work. So from the user's perspective, they could click new and it launches over and creates this new dialog box thing. That's pretty cool. They could see them all. If I click see all, it would update this list box. A bunch of the notes would be listed here, okay? If they click delete, then maybe I would confirm some like a little yes, no dialogue to make sure they want to actually delete a note. They would also have to select a note, select it from here to delete it, okay? If we want to see one note, same thing. If we wanted to see one note, we would have to select the note from that dialog box, and then it would display it, and it would display it maybe in this thing, because that's a pretty cool one to display it in. Just a thought there, okay? Searching, sorting, I think we have an idea of how this user interface could be laid out from the perspective of the user. Not only the user interface, but the user's experience using this, okay? All right, so let's make some kind of a screen capture out of this now. I think that will be good to do something like that. make another figure for our journal. Let's put that into our figure 3. Okay, we got something now. We got some ideas of where we're going with this. So let me back up. We've got a figure 1, a figure 2, and a figure 3. Just sort of clean them up a little bit. Of different ways that this could happen. And now let's imagine we went back to our user, right? So let's say we went back for feedback again on March the 20th. Went back to the user for feedback. User likes the user interface. And to maybe just shorten my word count now, I can start using the acronyms UI, and felt it would be a good user experience at this point. Okay, so went back. That one I might want to just, I haven't mentioned it yet, so experience, just to say what that means. Went back to my user for feedback. The user liked the UI and felt it would be a good user experience. Okay, so let's say now here it is, March 20th. I began development of my user interfaces by starting Netbeans Java project, creating packages. Packages are really just folders for all my code, my designs, and any media I might need. Okay? Which technically we've already done in this video, but I'm just going to remind you that that's kind of where we're going next, right? So we're going to start that development now. So let's get to work. Let's stop working in Word. Let's stop drawing pictures. Let's actually get down to some little bit of actual development now. Okay, so we've got a project, electronic notes. We've got a one Java file, just a one with public static void main, which literally does nothing. And we got a media package. Why don't we actually take a minute on the media package to find a picture, something that might inspire us to get going a little bit. Let's look for a picture of a sticky note, because that's what this whole thing was based on, was a sticky note, right? So let's pull up some images of sticky notes, see if we could find one. Let's be a little more clear about what we're looking for. I don't want one too big, so I'm just going to look for a smaller sized picture. I'm going to try some little tricks here to find some pictures that are a little smaller. Maybe I'll even use a icon file. That might be a good thing to search for. Maybe I'll just look for a icon. That one's pretty cool. Let's see how big it is. That's a little too big. But let me go to that website. Maybe I can find a smaller version on the website. Notes. Yeah, oh, look, there are other sizes of it. So that'll be good. I think I'll take this size. That's pretty good right there. So I'm going to save this image into my folder. Actually, no, I'm just going to put it on the desktop. This is going to be my notes icon, or just notes. So let's call it notes, PNG. That looks good. And now I'm going to use that in my development. So I am going to also now make another package for my user interfaces, my UI. I don't know if I like that. I'm going to actually say user interfaces as my package name. Okay? Into that user interfaces package, I'm going to build that user interface. And here's where a program like Netbeans or a program like Visual Studio can be very, very helpful. Sorry, I need a drink there. They have what we call Wysiwyg designers. What you see is what you get. That's why Visual Studio is called Visual Studio. So here in Netbeans, I can right-click at a new J-frame form. For those of you who've never taken my class, this is how a way you can do this. There are other ways. I'm right-clicking, creating a new J-frame form. Okay, in Java, in the Java Swing library or API, they call this the J-frame. So I'm going to do that. New J-frame form. Okay, so this one will be the main one. So I'll just call this my main user interface. So I'm just going to call it main UI. It is still a class. It's a class of code. It's just so that the Wysiwyg designer will help write a lot of that code for you. Okay, it's very similar in Visual Studio. It does the same thing. Because it's still a class, I'm going to start the name of this with a capital letter. Hit finish. Okay, so now I've got my Wysiwyg environment. I've got a place where I can stretch this out. And I've got over here a bunch of palette of controls that I can use. So for example, I can just drag a label on there. So there's this label. And then I also have this thing called a properties window, or a little properties panel, where I can change properties of that label, including what text is on the label. If you've done Visual Studio or even Visual Basic, you're familiar with this. This is the kind of environment it has. So I'm going to use this and just put in there electronic notes. That's going to be the name of my program. I think I'm also going to change the font. I'm going to make this look a little nicer. So I'm going to make this much larger, say size 36, bold. There we go, electronic notes. Now, let me take a look at my sketch here, right? That kind of matches what I put here. Let me just start putting some of the rest of this in there. A bunch of buttons and a little label right there. I'll do the image as well. Okay, so put on a label. Just say notes. Put on another label, because labels is also a way you can display images. What I'm going to do is take the text away, and I'm going to go to the property called icon. I'm going to click on the little ellipse, the 3 dots on the button, that's an ellipse. And now I can import into my project from my desktop the graphic called Notes that I downloaded. I will import it into my package called Media, because that was why I built the media package, was to put the media in there. And then click OK. And now the picture of the notes is on my design. Also now I can take a look over here. That package called media no longer is gray because there's something in there. And the something is my note graphic. Okay, great. I'm not here to teach you an entire computer science course, so just kind of put that graphic over there. All right, now I need a little list box here. For that, I'm actually going to recommend, if you're going to use a list box, one that's much easier to use is one that comes from this one called the AWT library down here. There's AWT and then there's Swing. There are more graphics libraries than that, but these are 2 that are given to you with the Netbeans Visual Designer. And in here is this list object. It's much easier to work with, coding-wise, than the one that's available in the Swing one called the list object there. It just has a little more overhead with the code, but feel free to use it if you want to look into that. But I'm going to put that little list box item there. And now I got to add some buttons, right? I got to add a bunch of buttons for all these actions that the user is going to do. So let me refresh. What are those actions? Okay, so they're actions like create a new note. Okay, let me copy and paste so that the buttons stay the same size. I would be able to display all notes. Oops. That would be something I'd want to do, is see all the notes, display them all. What else would I need to do with this? I would need to display the selected note. So instead of seeing all of them, if I want to just see one of those notes, I would display the selected one. I would also want to be able to delete notes. So I'm going to say the same thing, delete the selected note. Okay. Let's see, new note. Let me just check the design sort of plan here. New note, see them all, delete the note, see one note. Okay. Oh, searching and sorting. So that's what's left to do. I need to do some searching and some sorting. Put that there. Search all notes. Sort all notes. Okay, a little stretching of everything out and sort of cleaning things up a little bit. Here again, using a Wysiwyg designer helps a little bit because it does a little bit of the work for you. Sort of reposition my pictures. stuff like that. Everything's looking pretty good. Okay, so I think I got something. Electronic notes, picture, buttons. Let's see, does it kind of match what I had in my design overview here? Yeah, it kind of does, okay? Now that's another thing. The design overview is kind of also what we're doing here. So we're gonna have to kind of tweak our writing later, but I don't want to lose our momentum. We're kind of going pretty good here. I think it's time to build this thing now, this second user interface. And then maybe that's enough for this part of this video, okay? All right, so we got that done. We'll save that guy. And now I'm gonna make another one, and I'm gonna make sure I do it in user interfaces, new JFrame form. So this would be my new note user interface. So when I make a new note, this will be the user interface I use. Now for this one, I might want to have that look to match up with an actual, like I hold one up right here, an actual little sticky note. So I don't want too much. I don't want this too, filled with stuff. But we have a plan for it. We're going to have some labels. We're going to have some text boxes and stuff like that and some buttons. So I think we have an idea what it's going to look like. So we'll have a label and another label and a text field. For those of you using Visual Studio, they call it a text box. This one calls it a text field. And there's also one called a text area. That one's for a little bit bigger text. So I'm going to use that one for the note itself. With one more label. And then my two buttons, my OK cancel buttons. Okay, so let's kind of clean that up a little bit. So this will be me saying the note title. This one will be the note date. Okay, put the text field sort of beside them. Still want to give a little bit of space here. Don't want to crowd things too much. For those, I don't want any text inside of it, so I'm going to clear out the text from that one. Clear out the text from that one. This one will be where the actual note goes. Put that there. That lined up. Give it a little more space. And now I'll kind of draw out these buttons a little bit. So they go about halfway across. Just want to see how close. Oh, perfect. Okay. And then tighten that up. Whoops. Let's put those further down here. Stretch that. There we go. That looks pretty good. That'll be what we'll have for our new notes. Let me just change this text to OK and cancel. Oh yeah, that looks pretty solid. That looks pretty good. Okay. So I feel like we've made a lot of progress here. We've really built into this the development of our user interfaces, creating packages for all my code, my designs, and any media I might need. Okay, so I feel like I've done that. I feel like I've done a lot of that together. Now, could I at this point suggest that this record of tasks is a record of tasks and a design overview? I think that's one way to go. Okay. Should I just say that maybe I should be putting some of this write-up down in design overview? Maybe, in fact, all of it should go down here, and I should use record of tasks for the code. That's another way to go with it. This is also a reminder, another way you can look at how you can approach these written sections is to, once again, from my website, you could go to Computer Science IB, and I showed this in part 1 video. Scroll down to now this section where I now have the video from part 1 posted. You can look through a lot of other stuff on my IB website, including the link to sample IA projects. So let's once again pick a random sample IA. Today I'm going to pick number 50. Where did it go? I had it. 50. And documentation. And this student did a section B design and a section C development, but let's just see what section B design looks like. Okay, so they have a record of tasks where they discussed the product and figured out what it would want to be. So they got this sort of table, which is good. I like tables too. Maybe we should turn ours into a table. And then if I look at the next one, okay, description of Sotera, this is more their section A. Let me go here. Okay, so this isn't really showing the development like maybe I wanted it to. So let me try a different example now. Let's try a little newer one. Example 70, documentation, section B. Okay, so some design there. Still not happy with that one. I think they could maybe do a better job of that one. Let's try and find another one. Let's go into the 30s this time. Okay. Again, another. Oh, here we go. So here's a student who actually looks like they were making a battleship game, and they're showing kind of a sketch, very similar to what we just kind of did there. Now, they also have a testing plan. That's cool. We'll get into that later. But that, again, shows some sort of level of how they did this. Okay, but we got a really good start to our section B, and we got a really good start to the development. I think before we wrap up this video today, I want to actually try to run this, okay, and actually see this on the screen. So let's start with the original electronic notes, with the original main. Obviously, it has no code there. When you use the Visual Designer, it has the design section, and then up here under it, a way to jump to the source code. So I'm going to click that to jump to the source code. And you can see here, a lot of the source code is actually hidden from you. It's hidden in this section called generated code, which is all of this code that it used to build that design. We don't have to touch that. As a matter of fact, we cannot touch that because Netbeans intentionally locks it away from us. But it also provides another version of public static void main. Whenever you build one of those user interfaces, it puts that in there automatically for you, just in case this is the only thing you're building. Well, I don't want this one. I want to actually run the main off the original one. So I'm going to delete this version of public static void main. And I'm going to go to my other user interface, this one, source code, and I'm going to delete that version of public static void main as well. So I don't want them. I want to go back to the original version of public static void main and use that. However, there's another little quirk with Netbeans and with JFrame specifically. So it calls this method in the constructor of this main UI called init components or initialize components. That's the method that's hidden inside that collapse code. But after that method is done, I can still write my own code. And I'm going to take this thing, this main UI, which is a JFrame, dot, and I'm going to set it visible to be true. I want it to appear on the screen. Then I'm going to jump over to the public static void main, the original one, and I'm going to instantiate that object. I'm going to create a main UI, okay, the main UI, which because it's in a different package, I actually have to import it. So the main UI equals new main UI. And this one here needs a lowercase m because that's the name of the object, not the name of the class. So when it does this, it creates a main UI object, it calls the constructor, and it sets it visible to true. So I'm going to hit play to see if that code actually fires. Does it do what I asked it to do? And you can see on screen, it is in fact doing what I wanted it to do. Here is my electronic notes program getting ready to be coded. So we're underway, okay? Just for one more little thing, just for one more sort of just view of this, I'm going to go back to my design and I'm going to go to the button called Create New Note. And in the Netbeans Designer, just like in Visual Studio, I can actually double click the button and add the code there for it. That's really handy. And for this, just to see how it looks, I want to make a new Note UI. I want to see what that user interface looks like. Because we spent all this time doing this. So I want to kind of get a feel for what it looks like, just in case I want to make any little tweaks here at the last minute before we wrap up today's video. New Note UI equals new Note UI, and obviously I will need this line in that constructor as well. So after new Note UI is constructed, it will become visible, okay? And if I want, let's add a little more to this just to clean it up. Before I make it visible, this dot set location relative to null. This line of code will center it on the screen. So I'm going to put that in both of them. I'm going to say, you know what, center that on the screen. I think that would be a good idea. And let's see what it runs like now. So hopefully it appears in the center of the screen. There it is, center of the screen. When I click create new note, there it appears in the center of the screen. And I can get a feel for how this user interface looks now, these two user interfaces I built. I could even take this to my client. I think I could even document that and see what the client suggests I could change about this. And I could describe kind of what would happen when the client does these things. What would it look like? Okay? But I think that's enough for today's video. That was quite a lot, and it got a great start. Now, I know we really haven't written much code, well, a couple lines, but we got to work on the coding part for sure in part 3, but we got a great start for this today.